Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Sean Courtney and I'm the Marketing and Communications Officer at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Our webinar today, Office 365 Implementation Considerations, will be presented by Matt Walton, Senior ICT Advisor at InfoExchange. If you have a question during the webinar, please type it in the question box and we'll aim to pause about halfway through to answer them. And don't forget, a recording of today's presentation and a copy of the slides will be sent to you all following the webinar, so please keep a lookout in your inbox. And just before I hand over to Matt, don't forget we have our annual conferences in both Australia and New Zealand coming up shortly, so 11th to 12th of April in New Zealand and 18th to the 20th of May in Australia. So please check out the respective websites for more details. That's all from me, so I'll now hand over to Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Sean, and welcome everyone. It's great to be talking to you this morning about Office 365. Now, I know it may not be some of your favourite topics. I'm sure we've got some finance managers and operations people and maybe some IT people as well on the line. So this basic webinar is designed to really give you a sense of what are the things you should think about if you're looking at implementing Office 365. Now, it's assuming that hopefully some of you have heard of Office 365 and know a little bit about it. Hopefully some of you have already been on the Introduction to 365 webinar that was held recently. But it doesn't assume that you have really strong technical knowledge. We won't get into too much detail today about the technical configuration and those sort of things. It really is about what you need to think about before you implement Office 365. So my name's Matt Walton and I work for InfoExchange. So we're a not-for-profit as well, and probably for the last several years, but particularly in the last 18 months, since Microsoft have been offering the free licenses for Office 365, we've seen a really great take-up of not-for-profit organisations jumping onto the Office 365 platform. We actually have been doing not-for-profit surveys, so for those of you who have got your surveys in, thank you, where we've actually found recently that over the last 12 months there's been a 100% increase in people moving to Office 365, particularly for email. So what we're finding, it's a great platform for all sorts of organisations. Of those organisations, even just on this page here, they range from people with a couple of staff to a couple of thousand staff. So, and each of them are using it quite differently. So today we'll talk about some of the different ways that you can use Office 365 and what parts of Office 365 may be suitable to your organisation. So today, as we said, we'll do a bit of an overview. We'll talk about some benefits and privacy, and then we'll go through each of the key applications. So Exchange for email, SharePoint for documents and collaboration. We'll touch on Yammer, Skype for Business and OneDrive, mobility, and then we'll sort of talk about that business case and refer you off to other resources. As Sean said, you will get a copy of these slides. There is plenty of links in these slides, particularly at the end, where you can link off afterwards to go and start a trial if you want, or go and do some more research or do some more reading and really do that assessment as to whether it's suitable for you and how you would do it. We've also got a few case studies and those sort of things online. So let's start with a high overview of what is Office 365. So really it's a suite of online applications based in the cloud. I know some of you get scared by the word the cloud, but to me, I personally don't even like that word. It's really just saying that someone else is hosting this service for you. So instead of having your Exchange, your emails, and those other things sitting in a server under your desk, it really means that Microsoft just hosts it for you in their data center in Sydney or Melbourne. So it gives you Office apps, so Word Online, Excel Online, so you can write a Word document without having Office installed on your PC. It means that it's always up to date and it's reliable. So it means that Microsoft actually guarantee a 99.9% service level agreement where they can actually refund organisations that pay for services if they are down more than 99.9%. Now, for most of you, you'll actually get the free services, so that's not applicable, but it's just a commitment that proves that they're serious about it being reliable. Now, it also delivers a suite of applications that you used to have to install on your servers. So Exchange, I used to be an IT manager at a large national organisation. We had 6 Exchange servers to run our emails. And we used to maintain them and keep them up to date. And the same with SharePoint. We had a couple of SharePoint servers and Lync servers as well. So they all used to be servers that you'd go and install software on and then buy licenses for and then maintain on an ongoing basis. With Office 365, essentially all you do is once you apply for Office 365, you just turn it on and it starts working for Exchange and SharePoint and Lync. Now we'll talk about some of the implementation and configuration, but essentially you don't need to keep those updated. They just come as part of your Office 365 suite. And the platform also works on a range of devices. We'll touch on mobile later, but it works across Macs, across iPhones, all different types of devices, not just Windows devices. So, when you log into Office 365, this is basically one of the landing screens or the menu that you can choose from a range of different applications. Now, you don't have to use all of these, and some of these are additional add-ons and costs. So CRM's a bit of a different product that adds on that you do have to set up separately, but it is integrated as part of the Office 365 suite. So you do get mail, calendar, people, just those standard things that you used to get as part of your Exchange server that you access through Outlook. You also get things like Yammer, which is basically, they call it a Facebook for business. So we're seeing a lot of organisations get some real benefits out of using a platform like Yammer where your staff can talk and collaborate together. Now we'll come back to each of these and go into a bit more detail later. OneDrive for documents, Sites is for SharePoint. Now you see there you've got Word Online, Excel Online, PowerPoint and OneNote. So they're online applications that, as I said before, you don't need Word or Excel installed on your PC, which means you can go and work from an internet cafe or your parents' house or a mobile device or wherever you want to operate from without having to actually have that Office license. And they keep coming out with new and improved and interesting applications that may or may not be suitable for you, but they're free and they just basically appear one day into your application and you can choose to use them or not. So things like Delve and video is like a YouTube for a Microsoft version of YouTube. Power BI is some really exciting stuff happening with Power BI, business intelligence basically, dashboards and graphs and those sort of things. And Sway is like a presentation tool that you can use instead of PowerPoint. So that's a suite of applications, and to be honest, that will continue to grow and that will continue to evolve as Microsoft continue to invest in the platform. So the E1 plan, and the reason I'm focusing on the E1 plan today is, like all not-for-profits, I acknowledge and appreciate anything that's free. So the E1 plan is free for eligible not-for-profits. So most of you that have a DGR or do good work in the not-for-profit space should be eligible for the E1 plan. And what you get with that, so you get email, so you get 50 gig. Now 50 gig is a lot of mail. Most of our clients would never fill up 50 gig. Personally, I think I have about 1 gig in my mailbox, and that's probably as big as I will ever get in my mailbox. So you also get instant messaging. So that's Skype for Business. Used to be called Lync. Now Microsoft have bought Skype. They call it Skype for Business. and you essentially get that IM, the video conferencing and screen sharing for free as part of Office 365. You also get a lot of storage. So each user gets 1 terabyte of storage for their documents. So if you have 1,000 users, you have 1,000 users all storing 1 terabyte. Again, most clients of ours would never store up to 1 terabyte of data in their OneDrive, but it's there available for you. You also get 1 terabyte for SharePoint, and you also get additional storage per user. So, and SharePoint can be used also for document management and also collaboration tools and those sort of things. And discussion, again, can be SharePoint, or that can be Yammer as well. So you get a whole suite of applications, all for free. Now, some of you may also be wondering about your desktop copy of Office. Now, typically, most not-for-profits that we work with also go and buy their desktop version of Office from Connecting Up. I think the Pro Plus version of Office 2016 at the moment is $56. You can get standard for $40, or TechSoup obviously in New Zealand. So that's still probably the cheapest way to get Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, OneNote, all of those things stored on each desktop computer. However, you can also do it through plans as part of your Office 365 tenant. So the E3 plan is one that some organisations are moving towards. It is a paid plan, but it's heavily, heavily discounted. So this is a plan that corporate companies pay $20, $30 for, but charities get it for $6.38 per user per month. And the thing to remember is you can mix and match. So we have some organisations giving E1 licenses to all their volunteers and board members and all their casual staff, but some of their corporate staff who are office-based that need Office on their PCs, they might choose to install $6.38 worth of E3 license, and that installs the latest version of Office on your desktop on up to 5 devices. So personally, I have Office installed on my Mac at home. I have it installed on my laptop that I use at work every day. I have it installed on my iPad. I have it installed on my iPhone. And I could go and install it if I went away for a couple of weeks and worked from a holiday house. I could install it on the PC at that holiday house for a couple of weeks if I chose to, because I've got 5 licenses available. So that's how the Office works. And Click to Run is really easy to use. You don't have to go and find a disk anymore and run it through. You basically go to the portal in Office 365 and you click a button and it downloads it and installs Office on your computer, and then you're off and running. So some people don't even need IT people to install it. You can have users do that. You also get some more advanced mobile apps. So the apps are getting better and better every day with Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You can also have apps for Yammer, Outlook Web Access, Power BI. There's an admin portal app. There's apps for most things and most applications as part of the 365 suite nowadays. Some organisations are also choosing to purchase this E3 plan because you get what's called advanced email, which means legal hold and archiving. So basically what that is, if you want to keep and track every email that your organisation sends, regardless of whether the user deletes it or not, legal hold does that for you. So we work with some community legal centres and other organisations who, for retention purposes and for litigation and for a range of other reasons, want to keep all of the emails that are sent from any user in their organisation. And to do that, you need legal hold and you need an E3 license for that. Archiving also gives you an extra 50 gig for every user to archive that. There's also some really good tools coming around search and compliance and business intelligence. So Power BI is an additional license on top of this plan, but you do get some of those functions and features for business intelligence. So look, there are a heap of other plans available. There's even just Pro Plus, which is $3.19. If you don't want legal hold and mobile apps and you just want Office, you can buy a $3.19 add-on on top of your E1 license. So look, Microsoft licensing is never simple and easy to understand, but saying with this, most organizations are using the free licenses, and some who need some of these things on the slide will pay the $6.38 a user a month. One thing we get asked all the time is, what happens when the internet goes down? So it is Office 365 is a cloud-based product, and it does rely on the internet. However, if you have local applications, so if you have Outlook, if you synchronize your email with your local Outlook, so when you send and receive, all of that is stored locally. So if you go offline, you go on the aeroplane and you want to look at all your old emails and calendars and contacts, that will be there available for you if you're using Outlook or Word or Excel or something like that, where it's got a locally stored copy. However, you won't be able to send and receive if you don't have internet. The same with SharePoint. So you can synchronize SharePoint with what's called the OneDrive for Business client, and it stores a local copy on your PC or laptop. So, for example, I have a laptop and I sync most of my OneDrive libraries, my SharePoint libraries, using OneDrive. So the ones that I think I'm going to need, I synchronize, and then when I'm offline, I can access them and even edit them, and then when I log back into the internet, it will synchronize back up and apply any changes. So that the OneDrive client is getting better and better every day, and things like co-authoring and working together on documents and resolving syncs when they're offline is also getting better. So you can also, as it says with email, you can access your email using your iPhone with any mail client, basically. So again, I use my iPhone with the Apple Mail, and I also have Outlook Web Access if I want to see my calendars and contacts at the same time. But so you can do that, or it can operate from any device. So you can go to an internet cafe, open the web portal, and log on if the internet at your office is down. All right. We also get asked a lot about privacy and security. So for those of you who have some requirement to store your data in Australia, Office 365 has recently moved to data centres in Melbourne and Sydney. So for those of you who have been on Office 365 for a long time, some of the old content is gradually moving from Singapore, where it used to be hosted, and that's currently in progress. But any new tenant set up will automatically be in Australia. And if it's any comfort, many large organisations, including the Queensland Government, and most large not-for-profits that we work with, including Info Exchange, all using Office 365, but it does depend on what information you're storing. So we have some clients who have requirements that they store their client information in Australia or even in a specific state. So in those cases, they actually store their client management system or their client information on a server or in a system that's hosted in Australia. But that doesn't stop them moving their emails to Office 365 or using video conferencing or communicating non-client information related information using Office 365. So you can have a hybrid model where you store some information locally and you store some information on Office 365. Look, the security controls and privacy are pretty much industry best practice that Microsoft are doing a lot in this space, but there is some reading there if you want to do your own due diligence. I highly recommend that each organisation makes their own decision and assesses their own risk and have a read of those. But the one thing that you can be sure of is that you own and retain the rights to your data. So I have seen systems before where it's really hard to get off. Once you move on, it's really difficult to get off. Whereas Office 365, if you change your mind in a year and want to move to Gmail, or you want to go back to an on-prem Exchange server, you can do that. It's a migration process that you can migrate all your data off and delete everything off Microsoft, and it will be gone. So I might just pause for a minute and just check if there's any questions so far around that overview of Office 365 before I get into some more detail about each application. So next I'll start talking about Exchange Online and some more of the detail around that. But yeah, Sean, I might just throw to you and the audience for 5 minutes just to ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. We've got a few sort of more general questions. So the first one being from Amity, just saying, or asking, why would organizations still need the desktop version if they're using Office 365 in the cloud?
Yeah, so the desktop version of things like Word and Excel and Outlook, you would need that for a couple of reasons. Firstly, so that you can operate offline. So I use my Outlook and Word while I'm on the plane, for example, but that could also apply to if your internet goes down. Secondly, the functionality of the desktop version is slightly better than the online version. So the online version is a bit of a trimmed back, and it is fine for most organizations. But if you're doing some complex Excel formulas or pivot tables or those sort of things in Excel, or some really complex formatting or mail merging and those sort of things in Word, then you might lose a little bit of that functionality if you 100% rely on Word and Excel Online. And with a price like $56 from Connecting Up that you can basically use for a couple of years, we find that the value proposition is actually quite good to have the desktop version. And a lot of users are just used to it, and sometimes it's easier from a change management point of view to keep using a desktop version. But each organization makes their own choices, and yeah, many that we work with don't have the desktop version, and that works fine.
Great, thanks, Matt. Our next question is from Scott, who asks, do you know if Microsoft have a New Zealand data center for Office 365?
They don't at this stage. I haven't heard of any plans to moving to New Zealand, but what I do know, and there is a slide at the end of this that talks about New Zealand's privacy policies, and the commissioner in New Zealand privacy commissioner is quite good about publishing information. So part of it is the New Zealand organisations are starting to acknowledge that a lot of data is stored in Australia, and that's okay because there's similar privacy laws in both countries. But again, that's up to each organisation to check your own funding agreements and check your own contracts to determine whether it really matters for your organisation in New Zealand that it's stored in Australia or any other country. So, but no, that I know of, there doesn't seem to be any plans to host Microsoft Office 365 in New Zealand.
Thanks, Matt. Our next question is from Marie, who says, our organisation is a registered charity and appears to meet all the criteria for eligibility for the Microsoft donation programs. However, when we registered for Office 365, we were ineligible. Do you have any information or help sections that you can direct Marie to for that?
Yeah, and typically it's a decision that's actually made by Microsoft Global, and there is on the Connecting Up website, and I think it's on one of the slides here, but if not, I can send it to you directly, Marie, of eligibility criteria. Now, the rule of thumb, typically, if Connecting Up have deemed you eligible for Microsoft donations through their program, so if you can get Word and Office and server products, typically you are eligible for Office 365 E1. The organisations that we are seeing very occasionally not be eligible, there are some exemptions around health organisations and education organisations, but those exemptions are only because education and health have their own deals. So education have their own Office 365 offers, and so do health. So if you're not eligible for the charity E1, I would apply for the education one or the health one, whichever one you fit into. But probably the connecting up people that are doing those eligibility checks are often good people to start with as well, about giving you a reason why you're not eligible.
Thanks, Matt. Our next question is from Darren, who asks, is there a limit on the number of E3 licenses available under the Microsoft agreement through Connect? Microsoft agreement.
No. So you can basically have unlimited E1 or E3, as many as you want. So yeah, we have organisations with thousands of free E1 license, and obviously the E3 is the paid plan, but you can have as many of those as you like as well.
Great, thanks, Matt. We do have a couple more questions related to just the overall plans. Did you want to take those now before moving on, or?
Yeah, that's fine. We've got time.
Sure. So our next question is from Mark, who asks, is there anything I can do if my DNS provider won't support Office 365?
So DNS, I haven't yet seen a DNS provider that won't support Office 365. Basically, all the DNS has to do is point to Office 365. So Microsoft gives you the MX records and all the information, and essentially all they need to do is put that into the DNS portal, and it points it from your Exchange to Office 365. So I suppose my first question would be get a second opinion, and there are lots of DNS providers out there as well. But yeah, I'd really dig into the specific reason why they don't support it, because all DNS do is really point to where your email's hosted. So that shouldn't be a major barrier. We haven't really come across that. It's more if you don't have access to your DNS, then that can cause an issue, because you do need to make DNS changes to migrate to Office 365.
Great, thanks, Matt. And we do have a handful of questions related to the specific programs, so like Outlook and Exchange. So perhaps I'll let you continue with the content, and if they, please let me know, guys, if they don't get answered specifically, then we can broadcast them again later. So I'll let you move on now, Matt.
Thanks, Sean. And look, for anyone, if I haven't answered it fully enough or you want to flesh it out a little bit more detail, my email address is on these slides, mwalton@infoexchange.org. You can feel free to give me a call and flesh that out. Happy to give some free advice. And as Sean said, we'll leave some time for questions at the end as well. All right, so Exchange Online is essentially what most of you used to have as part of your Exchange server or email server, but it's just a hosted platform. Now, you can access Exchange Online through Outlook Web Access. So many of you in your old email systems would have had a web access portal that you could log into. So the Outlook Online essentially is the top left image there. It looks reasonably like Outlook, and it's just accessible in a web browser. So Chrome, Safari, Internet Explorer, doesn't matter what web browser it is. You can access your emails, calendars, and contacts through that. So on the bottom right, you can also see that you can access it through Outlook. So you can do both. So on occasion, when I'm working off someone else's computer, I use Outlook Online, but most of the time on my computer, I use my calendars, contacts, and emails through Outlook 2016. So as you see there down the bottom, you've got calendar sharing as well, distribution lists, and booking resources. So things like booking rooms, sharing calendars with your colleagues, that's all just natural part of Exchange Online. So essentially anything that you can do in Outlook and anything that you used to have on Exchange can be done with Exchange Online. The thing that you may need to consider as well is things like scanning to email. Some of your applications may email out of them, so they may also need some changes to make sure that they email through Office 365. But most of the time, we're seeing that most software platforms and most scanners work as well. So these are some of the things that we encourage people to think about when you're thinking of implementing Exchange Online. So really it's about your current infrastructure. So we see that most or many organizations do need to do some form of upgrade when it comes to your internet, your hardware or your software. So for example, if you've got a really, really poor ADSL connection and you're planning on doing a lot of email synchronization and things like video conferencing and syncing large documents and uploading, it's worth considering upgrading your internet. However, if you're emailing today using some sort of web portal or Gmail or even Exchange, and then next week you want to be using Office 365 and emailing the same things, really the change in bandwidth isn't dramatic. So we have organizations that operate on ADSL with Office 365 Exchange Online and it works fine. So it's really about assessing your organization and getting some advice on whether your internet is suitable. Hardware, do your PCs meet the minimum specs? So installing Office 2016 or Windows 10, or if you're installing Skype for Business locally and all those sort of things, and you've got five-year-old hardware that's on XP and those sort of things, I would encourage you to explore whether this upgrade is a good excuse to actually upgrade your PCs as well. Software, we do encourage people to use this as an opportunity to upgrade to the latest version of Office. So if you're on Office 2007 and you want to use the full functionality of Office 365, you will need to upgrade. 2010 you can get away with doing some things, but really we're suggesting that Office 2013 and 2016 are really designed to work with Office 365 and they have all the things inbuilt in them. So things like OneDrive, Skype for Business, all of that already comes with those Office products. There are slides in the appendices of this slide deck that give some more information about minimum hardware specs, about the different versions of Office, and about some examples of internet and what could work and what can't work. The other thing is your current users, assessing how you're currently using email. Are you currently using generic accounts? Are you using resources like booking projectors and rooms, distribution lists and public folders? Do you need all of those? How many mailboxes do you need? So doing that assessment will give you a good sense of what you need to be putting in Office 365, and in some cases you may want to do things differently. So we see a lot of organizations that use generic accounts and public folders and those sort of things. Use this as a chance to say, well, these E1 licenses are free. Let's give all our staff their own mailbox instead of 10 staff sharing the one generic mailbox. Public folders, Microsoft have been trying to wean off public folders for a long time. Really, you should be using resources and things like booking a resource if you want to book rooms and those sort of things, and central distribution lists. So doing that assessment is normally one of the first things that we do when we work with a client, is just collect all the information and gather that. The other component is make sure you resource both the technical and non-technical. A lot of our projects, we try and make sure that we have not just the IT manager involved, but the finance manager, the communications manager, just a range of stakeholders, both for change management and engagement. So really, particularly if you're going to ask users to change the way they work, it's great to get the CEO on board and a range of different people on board. And even things like determining your document structures and those sort of, often that's not an IT decision. Often it's an admin person or a group of people who are non-IT but would be the best place to actually decide how your documents should be structured in a SharePoint environment or something like that. And really the question is, does your IT contractor have the expertise? So look, hopefully a lot of IT contractors nowadays are building up their expertise in Office 365, but we do find occasionally that there are a lot of local support providers that are still more comfortable using servers, and yeah, we often encounter that where they're hesitant to move to Office 365 mainly because they're not familiar with it, and they would have difficulty supporting it. So that's something that you need to consider. So when you're doing an email migration, there's a range of different factors to consider. So, and developing a plan is the first important step. So really, when determining your approach, you need to look at your size. How we migrate someone with 5 mailboxes is totally different to how we migrate someone with 500 mailboxes. So you do need to consider that initially. Coexistence with your existing technical environment. So does it need to integrate with your current client management system, or is this the only system you're going to be using? How are you going to set up the users? If you've got 5 users, yeah, maybe you just set up a couple of new accounts manually. If you've got 1,000 users, you probably want to set up some sort of synchronization with your Active Directory or user tool to help you with that. Really, one of the key factors to determine how difficult and how expensive the migration is where your emails are now. What version of Exchange? Is it a really old 2003 Exchange server? Or are you on Gmail? Or are you on the latest version of Exchange, so it's going to be reasonably simple? So all of these factors will help you determine how to migrate to Office 365. And do you want everyone to have single sign-on? Do you have a local Active Directory that you want synchronization with, or do you just want to give them a cloud account? We have a mix of both. We have some organizations who give all their casuals and volunteers, all they have is an Office 365 account, whereas people based in the head office actually have a local directory account that's synced. So this slide here talks about the different migration options. So this may help you choose one of these categories, and this could be how you could go to your local provider and say, look, based on this webinar that I did, I think we need to do a cutover migration, or what do you think? And again, work with them on this. But if you're a small organization and you're using Outlook, less than 30 PCs, often the most efficient way to do it is a manual export and import from Outlook. Essentially what it does, it exports your mail, calendars and contacts from your Outlook, and then when you import them, it imports them into Office 365. So it essentially uploads them into the cloud and enables you to view it through Outlook. So we've had some where volunteers have done this or staff have actually done this. So that's one approach that we use for smaller organizations. If you're using Gmail and you just want email moved from Gmail across, you could look at using IMAP, which is a free tool inbuilt into Gmail, and you can configure that in Outlook and basically synchronize it across. But it doesn't bring your calendars contacts. So that's why sometimes for Gmail we actually use a third-party migration tool that brings across calendars and contacts as well. Cutover migration. So if you're between 30 and 100 users and you're happy to everyone move on the one night, so one day everyone's using your local Exchange, and then the next day or after the weekend everyone is using new Office 365, a cutover may be suitable. It requires a bit of technical configuration on your server, and it also requires you to go and configure Outlook on each of those PCs. Stage migration is a bit more complex for older 2003 or 2007 exchanges. You can actually do your migration in groups, which is good for some larger organizations. But typically what we're saying, if you've got over 100 users, most organizations that we're working with are doing hybrid migrations. So what that means, it actually, you can migrate in small groups whenever you want over a period of, we have some hybrids that, stay in working for a year. Basically, it's your local exchange and Office 365 working side by side, and then gradually you move small groups of users from your exchange over to Office 365. And the great bit of the hybrid is you actually don't need to go and configure Outlook. So we have some national organisations who don't want to go to Kalgoorlie or Darwin or wherever to go and configure the Outlook. So doing a hybrid actually makes it really easy. So keep in mind though, it is harder to set up a hybrid. You do need some technical expertise to actually set this up. So each one of those has different costs involved, and the hybrid's probably a little bit more expensive than most of the others. And it means that your Exchange server will need to keep running for another 6 to 12 months or however long that you want your hybrid to run for. So that's basically things to think about for your email migration. So I'm going to move on to SharePoint, but again, any questions about that, or again, if we can help with that, you follow up with me separately after this. So SharePoint is a wonderful tool that is quite diverse and quite different. So again, we have lots of different organizations using SharePoint for lots of different things. It used to be the product that you would install on a server, and many of you may already have intranets or portals or document areas that are on SharePoint 2007 or SharePoint 2010. Nowadays, you just get the latest version of SharePoint available online, and you can go and create your own sites as part of that. Some organizations use SharePoint purely for documents, and they use it as a sort of server replacement for some organizations that's suitable. Other organizations use it as an intranet and don't actually store documents on it, like their server documents on it at all. They may still keep a local server for some of their large files or their some types of documents, and use the intranet more for forms and project management and a range of other tools. So you can see that middle one there. We've used SharePoint as a project management portal for some organizations where they can keep their Gantt charts and project teams and lists of projects and tasks. Some organizations also use it for a HR portal, so people go in and fill out forms and those sort of things. So it is quite a flexible tool, and there is also third-party apps that you can, advanced apps for workflows and forms and other add-ons and plugins that you can buy from the SharePoint online store, Office 365 store that you can buy as add-ons. But look, we would always encourage people to start small and use what's most relevant. The one thing that we find confuses organizations, and that this slide's hopefully going to help, is the difference between SharePoint and OneDrive. So typically how we recommend, now it's different for every organization, but typically OneDrive is used per user. So personally, I have a OneDrive where I store my just day-to-day working documents that or my professional development or things that don't need to be shared with my team. And if I ever left Info Exchange and my account was deleted, it wouldn't be a big deal that all those files actually get deleted. However, any important documents, any client documents or any documents that I share with my team, I actually have in a SharePoint environment that all of my team can see. So that's what you would put into SharePoint Online. Now you get different storage and different functionality, and OneDrive is more for basic document management. Look, you can share documents in OneDrive, but again, it gets a bit messy. SharePoint Online is designed to be a collaboration portal or a team site. So if you're thinking that a large group will edit documents, I'd recommend headed down the SharePoint path and manage centrally, so that if I ever leave, all those SharePoint documents always stay where they are in SharePoint, and the rest of my team can manage them. The other thing that you can do with both SharePoint and OneDrive is you can synchronize them so that they are available offline with what's called the OneDrive for Business desktop client. That synchronizes on an ongoing basis your files back up to SharePoint and OneDrive. So those are things that we often find confusing, and look, they are can get a bit more complex, but that should give you a high-level overview of what the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint is. If you're thinking of using SharePoint, really it's about what are you going to use it for. Look, it can do lots of things, but often we see that when organizations try and do lots of things with it, it may not be suitable for everything, or it may not be the best tool at everything. But we've seen some organizations, they use it for incident reports, they use it for forms, they use it for documents and projects, and collaboration, and it can work for all of those things. Really, it's looking at what of your current systems you're going to move across and your information architecture. So we have some organizations that come to us with a really messy file server and say, I want to just dump it all on SharePoint. And look, we usually recommend strongly against that. And usually it's a great opportunity to look at what information you have and how it's best structured, and then structure it in a way that works for your organization and is reflective of how people access information and your organizational structure, and things like permissions and who's allowed access to what documents and those sort of things. So, and what things could maybe be best stored locally. So some organizations still, as I said, keep a NAS or keep a server locally so that they don't have to upload and download big video files or large images and those sort of things that will eat up your bandwidth if you're storing them on SharePoint. Assigning people to lead the project, both IT and comms or admin staff, is important because, as I mentioned before, change management is usually the most important part of any SharePoint project. Often we work with clients and let's say it's a week, 5 days worth of effort to implement SharePoint. Often 4 days of those effort is non-technical. Things like project management, training, user engagement, working out what people want and how they could use the system. Actually creating the SharePoint site and the users is probably only 1 day of that project, but it's all the non-technical stuff that is important, and training and change management. All right, now just on SharePoint though, before we move off, there is actually a whole other webinar on SharePoint that I think we're running in a month. So SharePoint again is very technical. We run full workshops on SharePoint. So those 3 slides didn't do it justice, but yeah, hopefully we can park that, and for those interested in SharePoint, we can come to the next webinar or some do-it-yourself workshops or some other or resources available. Skype for Business, look, this is a really easy one to implement. You basically turn it on and you can start using it. Now, obviously, if you're using video in particular, it will use up your internet connection. So if you're on a really poor ADSL connection, don't expect that you'll be able to have 5 people videoing at the same time. But you may be able to use things like point of presence, where you can see on that screen there where my photo has a bit of a green bar around it and says I'm available. That's because it pulls that information from my calendar. If I was in a meeting, it would have busy or out of office or those sort of things, or away. So often that tool alone is really valuable in an organization that works across multiple offices. Headsets for audio is an important one, and external contact sharing. So I actually have a lot of my clients in my Skype for Business list of contacts, and I send instant messages all the time or do video conferences through that. So we have some organisations that really save a heap of money just by using Skype for Business video conferencing. Yammer is one, so these ones I'm just skimming through really quickly, but just giving you a taste of them. So Yammer is one that, as I said, it's a bit like Facebook for Business, and some organisations we're working with are actually just using Yammer as part of Office 365 and might do email and other things later. But for a company collaboration platform, it's really quite good. So it's internal. You can have external groups as well, or external Yammer networks, but what we're finding is setting up a Yammer network for your organisation and then setting groups up under that so that people who are interested in a topic can subscribe to that group. So in our office, we've got a greening info exchange group that are trying to get info exchange carbon neutral. So they have a group that talk about that, whereas some people in our office aren't interested in that. They're interested in their work tasks that we also have groups for. So that is a flexible tool that you can use however you want. There's also mobile apps, and you can also put a feed in your SharePoint site. And again, it's all about engagement and adoption, and having CEOs and other people post content is often a good way to get these things adopted and used and make it relevant for people's day-to-day work. Mobility. So with all these apps, as I said, there are a lot of apps now that Office 365 is releasing. That whole screen of my iPad there, they're all Office 365 apps. So there's a Yammer app that I use all the time. Skype, I actually use instant messaging with Skype all the time on my iPhone. And each app you can download separately, and most of those are free apps. So you can also manage those apps through a new product called Mobile Device Management. So for those of you who are starting to use more mobile devices and you want the ability to do things like remote wipe and manage apps, I would encourage you to explore Mobile Device Management, which is free as part of Office 365. If you want full device management and the ability to deploy software and again, wipe the whole device and those sort of things through Microsoft, there's a product called Intune that you can pay for $7.70 a user a month. So that's, again, just some things that are available if you're interested. So we're running out of time, but this really just talks about how you can sell this to your board and justify the move to Office 365. So usually organisations come to us when their Exchange servers are coming to near the end of life, and they say, oh look, I could go out and buy another $5,000 server plus Exchange licenses, or let's spend a couple of grand moving to Office 365 and that's fine. Video conferencing, we have some organisations who have justified the cost purely in saving travel time because of video conferencing. Hardware failure, you don't have to worry about backups and making sure your server's up to date. It's always there. And I think one of the most important things is having that single source where you can all edit documents in the one location so that there's no confusion about what's the latest version and all of those sort of things. So I'll finish with top 10 tips and then we'll save some time for questions. So implement the things that are going to be valuable to you first. So don't try and do it all at once. So if your Exchange server's about to die, do that first. If you want some internal staff engagement, maybe do Yammer first. Often things like SharePoint are a bit more complicated and it requires some more user change, so often they're a secondary project. But really, you don't have to do it all at once, or at all. You can just do one or two applications and use them forever and never use SharePoint if you don't want to. The engaging local champions and really explaining the benefits is always the best way to do any IT project, but in particular Office 365, we've found that you've got to get people on board and really get them excited about it. And even if they're not IT people, if you start showing them some of the applications of things like, hey, this is how you could use Skype for Business with a client, often they get really excited about that and help with the adoption and help with the project. 3, review your bandwidth, and in many cases, if people are going to be using it a lot, it's often worth the investment into a synchronous Ethernet connection, or looking at fiber and those sort of other bandwidth network upgrades, but not essential all the time. I would almost always upgrade to Office 2016 or on your PCs. Definitely don't use 27 or 2010. And look, use an expert if you don't have the internal expertise. Often it can help mitigate some of the risks involved in changing if you have someone that knows what they're doing. So speak to your support provider first and see if they've got the capacity. View your controls and policies. So often it's a good opportunity to upgrade things like how your password protocols, and how, if people are putting post-it notes on their monitors, just to change those practices. Local storage can still be relevant. Don't assume that you will definitely get rid of all your local servers and storage. Maybe look at syncing with Active Directory and looking at using some online collaboration tools like SharePoint and Yammer. All right, so there's a slide around some additional resources. Again, you can link off to those. And we've got DIY workshops, we've got readiness assessments, we've got additional webinars, and Info Exchange can help actually implement if you want, or give you some advice if you want to try and do it yourself, but you just need some tips. And we can do SharePoint configuration. Connecting Up and Info Exchange are also running a roadshow, and I think we'll have events in every city in New Zealand and Australia. So if you want a bit more information, a bit more in depth, come to one of those roadshows. Or feel free to ask me any questions. All right, so Sean, I think I've got 2 minutes, but I'm happy to stay for 10 minutes or however long any questions take. And we'll also put the recording up. So happy to throw to you and to questions.
Great, thanks Matt. Yeah, I've got a few that have come through. So first one being from Nikki, who asks, what version of Windows is best to use with Office 365?
I've actually got some appendices here that I've got a slide here. So it will work with anything from Windows 7 on. If you've got anything like XP or before Windows 7, it's actually not supported by Microsoft, so I would upgrade anyway. Look, where I'm using Windows 10, a lot of our clients are migrating to Windows 10 and it's working fine. But if you're not ready to move to Windows 10, then you can work with Windows 7 and 8.1, works fine.
Great, thanks Matt. Our next question is from Margaret, who asks, how would we manage backup and disaster recovery for our data and web apps?
Yeah, so again, it comes down to what you're wanting to, what disaster you're wanting to prepare for. So Microsoft do back up all of your information. So typically we're seeing that people don't do backups of Exchange Online or anything like that because Microsoft take care of all of that for you. However, some organizations, if they want offline copies, one, if you're using Outlook and the internet goes down, you can still access your information. If you're using SharePoint and you're synchronizing your libraries, you've got offline copies for the internet when the internet goes down. If you're preparing for a disaster where your office goes down, you can actually just operate this from any web browser. There are, if you really must have an on-site copy or a backup of SharePoint, there are some tools available that you can have an offline copy, but most organizations aren't deeming that necessary.
Great, thanks, Matt. Our next question is from Sib, who asks, is Skype for Business as secure as traditional video conferencing systems? Some people seem reluctant to use Skype for Business.
I haven't personally got any concerns with security around Skype for Business. It depends what you mean by security. Obviously, the Microsoft are hosting Skype for Business, and they're hosting all the data in their data centers, and I'm reasonably confident with their security. There are, back on one of the previous slides, this one, Microsoft Trust Center, they talk about privacy and security and what they're doing to protect your data. So I would have a read through that if you're concerned about security, and have a look at all the different layers of security there and privacy they're putting on all of their all of the data that sits in Office 365.
Great, thanks, Matt. Our next question is from Vanessa, who asks, since bandwidth and reliability is so critical, what advice for rural, regional, or outer suburb organisations do you have? Some of us don't have ADSL even.
So that would be considering what you put on Office 365. So I probably wouldn't put all your documents on SharePoint. If you expect really good, quick downloads and uploads, I probably wouldn't use video conferencing. But having your emails on the cloud is fine, and maybe some local storage for documents or particularly your large documents. I would also use Office apps like Outlook, Word, Excel. So if you've got some reliability issues, you can at least keep working while the internet is cutting in and out. So that would be my recommendation about just looking at what you use it for. Don't assume that you can use all the functions and features with really poor internet.
Thanks, Matt. And follow-up question from Rebecca in regards to that is there a pre-test that can be done to determine if current internet bandwidth is sufficient?
Yeah, look, one of the things we are doing with organisations is doing a readiness assessment, which you can purchase for $100 through Connecting Up, where we help you with that assessment. You can do a free internet speed test to speedtest.net. You can go online and test your internet speed, but the key is determining what speed is going to be suitable for your organisation. And to be honest, you may need some external advice for that.
Thanks, Matt. Next question is from Narrowly, who asks, are databases such as Access suitable for use in SharePoint?
Just before we move on to that, those who are asking about internet bandwidth, I've got a slide up on the screen and in the slide pack that will do that. Look, SharePoint does have an access component where it can synchronize, but I often don't recommend it, because depending on how complex your Access database is, often if you synchronize it with SharePoint, it can lose some of that functionality. So I wouldn't automatically assume that you can just upload your Access database into SharePoint. But there are other platforms, things like Microsoft Azure. If you're really just looking at somewhere to host a database or an application, then maybe Microsoft Azure is more a platform for you.
Thanks, Matt. And we've just got the last few questions to go. So first one being from Julie, just asking, how easy is it to move files from OneDrive to SharePoint?
So if you've got both OneDrive and SharePoint synchronized, then you've actually got them in Windows Explorer, and you can drag and drop between Windows Explorer. So you basically have two windows open and you drag and drop across. Worst case, you download and then upload, but if you don't have them synchronized. But they are separate areas. OneDrive and SharePoint are separate areas, so you would need to have that open with the Explorer option to drag them in or upload.
Cool. Thank you, Matt. And our next question is from Nikki, who asks, we have our own Exchange server and a file server. Can we still save our files on our own file server? And how does Office 365 work with our current Exchange for emails? Let me know if you need me to read that one again.
No, that's fine. And this is a very common scenario where you can choose which applications you use. So we have some organizations who say, look, I'm happy with my file server. Everyone's sitting in the one office and we access the file server, and that's going to be quicker for most of us than putting it up on SharePoint. But my Exchange server is about to die, so let's move your email Exchange to Office 365 and keep your file server locally. But if you wanted to get rid of your file server, you could explore whether SharePoint was an option, and you could essentially, whether getting rid of both of those servers was a good option for you. So you could essentially move both of those servers, one to Exchange Online and one to SharePoint Online. But as I said before, there are other reasons to keep a local server, so that's where you need a bit of an assessment to determine whether having it locally has some benefits for you.
Great, thanks, Matt. And Teresa was just seeking some clarification around emails. She's just asking, so for emails you need to be on Office 365 or Outlook, not both?
No, I use both. So Outlook is the client that you install on your desktop that allows you to view your emails, so calendar and contacts. Office 365 is where the emails sit and where they live, and it's Exchange Online. And you can actually access that through a web browser without using Outlook. So you can just operate without Outlook if you want to. But most people, particularly Office-based people, have Office 365 to host their emails and then Outlook to view them and send and receive, and add their calendars and contacts as well.
Great, thanks, Matt. And this looks to be our final question for today, which is from Tech, who asked, how much internet data usage can we expect per user for email, Word, and Excel usage most of the day?
Look, it really depends. There's not a, I'm sorry to give a vague answer, I don't like doing that, but there isn't a one answer for that. But if you're using email now on Gmail, or even if you're on a local Exchange server, you're probably going to use a similar amount of emails. If you're sending and receiving the same emails on Exchange and sending and receiving the same emails on Exchange Online, your bandwidth is probably going to be the same. If you're using Word locally and then just uploading a Word document at the end of the day, the only bandwidth you're using is that upload of that Word document at the end of the day. So if that's a couple of meg, then that's not very much at all. If you're using OneDrive, you will synchronize all of your documents all day. So you will probably use up more bandwidth if you're using something like OneDrive. And then if you go to something like video conferencing, that's obviously going to use a lot more bandwidth. So I think the answer is if you're using email the same as you're using it now on Office 365, then the bandwidth difference won't be great. It's all those other little things like synchronizing and video conferencing that will really put a big impact on your bandwidth.
Great, thanks, Matt. And that brings us to the end of our questions, so perhaps we'll wrap it up for today. So thank you firstly, Matt, for presenting, and thank you everyone for joining. And as mentioned earlier, a link to the recording of the webinar and a downloadable version of the slides will be sent to you all in the coming days, so please keep a lookout. And if you have any questions on today's webinar, please feel free to send them through to events@connectingup.org, or you can also email Matt at mwalton@infoexchange.org. And lastly, don't forget to check out details of our upcoming conferences in New Zealand and Australia. So our TechSoup New Zealand conference will be held in Auckland April 11th to the 12th, and our Connecting Up conference will be in Melbourne in May 18th to the 20th. And early bird registrations for the Connecting Up conference close this Friday, so make sure to register before then to get the discount if you do plan on going. That's all from me. So Matt, did you have anything you'd like to add before closing?
No, just a quick thank you to everyone. Sorry for going a little bit over time, but also more than happy to follow up with any questions. Feel free to contact me directly, and happy to help out, and good luck.
Great, thanks everyone, and see you next time.